In the long history of America, many children have lived inside the White House, but almost all of them were girls. Chelsea Clinton, the Obama daughters, the Bush twins. Yet there was one boy who entered those historic halls in the 21st century, and his name was Barron Trump. At just 10 years old, he moved from the glittering heights of Trump Tower into the most famous residence in the world. Unlike his siblings, Barron did not grow up before the cameras or in the boardrooms of his father's empire. Instead, he was a quiet shadow, an only child in a palace of power, living under constant watch yet rarely heard from. What does it mean to grow up not only as the son of a billionaire president, but as the only boy to spend his formative years in the White House in modern American history? Barron's life has been shaped by both unimaginable privilege and extraordinary isolation. His story is one of silence, mystery, and the heavy weight of a famous name. Today we step inside that untold world, the special life of Barron Trump, the boy who grew up in the White House. Before we dive into this captivating story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our exclusive stories about power, wealth, and the hidden truths behind the world's most talked about figures. From the moment Barron Trump entered the world, his life was destined to be unlike that of any other child. As the youngest son of Donald Trump and the only boy among Trump's 5 children, Barron occupied a position both unique and deeply symbolic. His very existence was a blend of privilege and expectation, a childhood unfolding in the shadow of a father whose name carried global recognition and controversy. Unlike his sisters Ivanka Tiffany and half-siblings Don Jr., and Eric, Barron was not raised in boardrooms or in front of television cameras. He was instead a child of 2 worlds, one of dazzling luxury inside the golden towers of Manhattan, and another of relentless public scrutiny when his father became president of the United States. To understand Barron's story, one must look to history. Many children have roamed the halls of the White House, yet most of them were daughters. Chelsea Clinton, the daughters of Barack Obama and the Bush twins, each had their childhoods marked by history, yet their narratives still followed familiar patterns. Barron's, however, was strikingly different. He was the first boy in modern times to grow up in the presidential mansion, and this made his journey not only rare, but symbolic of a new chapter in America's political legacy. At just 10 years old, he carried the title of first son in a way unseen for generations. Yet this privilege came with an invisible burden. Imagine being a child, yet having the eyes of the world fixed on you, your every step observed, every photograph analyzed. While his peers at school could stumble, make mistakes, and learn in private, Barron's smallest gestures could spark speculation and headlines. He became a paradox, a boy surrounded by unimaginable wealth and power, yet often isolated, voiceless, and protected behind guarded walls. In him lived the contrast of innocence and expectation of being both a son and a symbol. Barron Trump's childhood was not just about growing up, it was about enduring history itself. Before Barron Trump ever set foot in the White House, his world was already one of extraordinary wealth and wonder. He spent his earliest years inside Trump Tower, the glittering skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan that symbolized his father's empire. But for Barron, it wasn't just an office building or a luxury landmark, it was home. The golden walls, marble floors, and sweeping city views framed the backdrop of his childhood. Unlike most children who grew up in suburban houses or apartments, Barron had an entire floor to himself, a sanctuary carved out within the towering palace of glass and steel. Here, security guards patrolled the hallways, every detail carefully monitored, creating a world both safe and distant, both dazzling and isolating. Yet despite the lavish setting, Barron was not a child defined by extravagance. Where his father thrived in the spotlight and his siblings learned early to navigate fame and business, Barron remained reserved, almost withdrawn. He was often described as thoughtful, shy, and quiet, a boy more comfortable in solitude than in the chaos of flashing cameras. The towering ceilings and ornate rooms of Trump Tower were filled with wealth, but for Barron, they were simply the walls that sheltered his private world. His life, though surrounded by unimaginable luxury, was not about showing off. It was about being hidden away, carefully guarded from the relentless public eye. At the heart of this protection was his mother, Melania Trump. Long before she became First Lady, Melania made a decision that would shape Barron's childhood. She would shield her son from the media as fiercely as possible. While Donald Trump built his legacy on attention and spectacle, Melania built a quiet fortress around her child. She rarely allowed interviews about him, refused to let him become a constant feature in tabloids, and focused on giving him something priceless and ordinary rhythm to his days amidst extraordinary surroundings. Within the marble halls of Trump Tower, Barron was not just the son of a billionaire. He was Melania's boy, raised with care, distance, and a mother's unwavering protection. At just 10 years old, Barron Trump experienced a transition that very few children in history could ever imagine. One day his world was the shimmering heights of Trump Tower, with golden ceilings, private security, and the rhythm of Manhattan life. The next he was stepping through the storied gates of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House, a place where history lingers in every hallway and where privacy dissolves into the constant gaze of the world. For Barron, it was not simply a change of address. It was the beginning of a new existence, one that would strip away the ordinary comforts of childhood and replace them with the surreal reality of life inside America's most famous home. The move was more than symbolic, it was a seismic shift in the very fabric of his life. At Trump Tower, he could retreat to his private floor, hidden from the bustle of the city below. At the White House, he was watched 24/7, his every movement shadowed by the Secret Service. The grounds may have been vast, with sprawling gardens and iconic rooms, but there was no true escape. Every step was measured, every activity scheduled, every visitor recorded. The boy who once found solace in solitude now lived in a fortress where solitude itself became rare. The cameras made the change even more difficult. Wherever he appeared, on the White House lawn, at official events, or even walking to school, lenses followed, hungry for a glimpse of the elusive first son. Unlike the Obama daughters or the Bush twins, Barron had no sibling by his side to share the peculiar weight of such attention. He was the only child in the White House at that time, a boy surrounded not by brothers and sisters, but by guards, advisors, and history itself. The laughter of other children was replaced by the echo of polished shoes on marble floors, the silence of rooms built for power rather than play. And so Barron's leap into the White House was not just the story of a boy moving homes, it was the story of innocence colliding with history. To be so young yet to carry the invisible burden of a world watching is something few can understand. He was still a child, yet also a symbol, a living reminder that even in the heart of politics and power, there was a boy learning to grow up under the heaviest shadow of all the presidency of his father. From the very first day his father took the oath of office, Barron Trump's life was thrust into a kind of spotlight that few children could endure. On Inauguration Day, as millions watched, every glance, every movement of the 10-year-old boy was captured, replayed, and dissected online. A simple yawn, a distracted gaze, or a shy smile, things that should have belonged only to the innocence of childhood, suddenly became viral moments broadcast across the globe. Unlike his siblings, who had already built adult identities, Barron's story was being written in real time in front of cameras he had never asked for. The White House was no longer just his home. It was the stage of an endless performance he never auditioned to join. Social media magnified this reality in ways no presidential child before him had ever faced. The daughters of Obama, the twins of Bush, even Chelsea Clinton in the 1990s, all had endured scrutiny, but the digital world had not yet exploded into its all-consuming force. For Barron, however, every photo, every clip, every gesture could trend within minutes, reaching millions of strangers. He was too young to understand the algorithms, but old enough to feel the weight of strangers' opinions. Some comments were kind, admiring his height or his quiet composure. Others were cruel, mocking, or speculative, forgetting that behind the famous last name stood only a child. The burden of judgment weighed heavily, even if he never spoke of it publicly. Imagine carrying the expectations of a nation, the criticisms of the world, and the curiosity of millions, all while still trying to navigate middle school. Unlike the Obama daughters who shared their experience with each other, Barron was alone, the sole child in the White House, with no sibling by his side to share the pressure. The digital age turned what might have been private growing pains into global talking points. In Barron Trump's case, childhood was not only lived, it was broadcast, judged, and immortalized online forever. If there was one constant in Barron Trump's life, it was the protective presence of his mother, Melania Trump. Long before she became First Lady, Melania understood the dangers that came with her husband's fame, and the merciless glare of politics. From the moment Barron was born, she made a vow that her son would not be consumed by the spotlight, that he would grow up with as much normalcy as possible, despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding him. While Donald Trump sought cameras and headlines, Melania quietly worked to shield Barron from them, building a cocoon of privacy around her only child. Her most defining decision came at the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency. While the world expected the first family to move immediately into the White House, Melania delayed the move. She insisted on staying in New York so Barron could finish his school year at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School, away from the chaos of Washington. This choice spoke volumes. It was a mother's declaration that her child's stability mattered more than political appearances, that his childhood would not be disrupted for the sake of ceremony. In those months, she walked Barron to school herself, trying to give him the ordinary rhythm of life that history was threatening to steal away. Even after they finally settled into the White House, Melania's influence remained steady. She worked tirelessly to keep him grounded, encouraging simple routines, private play, and distance from the whirlwind of politics. While others fought for power in those historic halls, she fought for Barron's innocence. Their bond went beyond appearances. It was rooted in her Slovenian heritage. At home, mother and son often spoke in Slovenian, a secret language that kept their world private in a house where nothing ever truly belonged to them. Those quiet conversations, those small rituals of family life, were priceless. In a place designed for presidents, Melania created a refuge for a boy. The world saw Melania as elegant, reserved, sometimes distant, but Barron saw her as his shield. In her, he found both a mother and a protector, someone who never let him be swallowed by the chaos that defined their family's name. Their bond was not one of luxury or politics, but of love, privacy, and the rare ability to hold on to simplicity, even in the storm. If Barron's childhood carried any sense of normalcy, it was because Melania fought for it step by step, moment by moment. Behind the heavy gates and the constant presence of security, Barron Trump's education unfolded in a world both privileged and restricted. In New York, before the presidency reshaped his life, he attended Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School, one of Manhattan's most elite private institutions, surrounded by children of wealth, power, and influence. Barron's school life was already unlike that of ordinary American kids. Yet when his father became president, his path took another turn. In 2017, the family announced that Barron would attend St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Potomac, Maryland, making him the first presidential child not to study at Sidwell Friends, the traditional choice of America's political elite. This decision alone reflected Melania Trump's quiet determination to give her son a different path, one less entangled with tradition and political expectations. But even at St. Andrews, Barron could never escape the shadows of power. Every school day was escorted by a Secret Service motorcade. Classrooms were discreetly monitored, and teachers had to adjust to the silent presence of protection agents. For his classmates, Barron was both a mystery and a reality. He was there laughing, sometimes quietly answering questions with a reserved intelligence, yet always separated by the invisible walls of who he was. Rare insights from those who crossed his path paint a picture of a boy unlike the stereotypes attached to his last name. Teachers described him as thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly humble. Peers noted his towering height, his shy smile, and his tendency to observe more than he spoke. While privilege defined the environment around him, Barron himself seemed to search for normalcy, to simply be a student, rather than the son of one of the most polarizing figures in the world. In those classrooms behind closed doors, he was not the billionaire's heir or the president's child. He was just Barron. From the quiet boy who once hid behind his mother's hand at public events, Barron Trump has transformed into a striking figure whose extraordinary height has captured the fascination of millions. Towering well over 6 feet before even reaching adulthood, he became an unexpected headline wherever he appeared. His presence at rallies, family gatherings, or rare public outings seemed to shock the world each time, not only because of how much he had grown, but because his physical stature had become a visible metaphor for the silent transition from boyhood to manhood. The media could not look away. Headlines marveled at his height. Photographs of him walking beside his father or mother went viral, and fashion commentators even began dissecting his rare but impactful style choices. A simple suit, a casual jacket, or even sneakers suddenly became subjects of endless online discussion. For a young man who had long avoided the spotlight, Barron's growth made anonymity impossible. He had become a figure impossible to overlook even when he said nothing at all. Yet behind the fascination lies a deeper symbolism. Barron's towering frame reflects not just physical growth, but the towering expectations placed upon him. To many, he represents the next chapter of the Trump dynasty, a blank canvas on which the world projects ambition, hope, or controversy. But to Barron himself, those expectations may feel like an invisible weight pressing down as he navigates the delicate line between his private identity and his public inheritance. His height may set him apart in a crowd, but it is also a reminder that he cannot escape the legacy of the name he carries. In every photograph, every comparison, and every whispered speculation, Barron Trump's presence looms larger than life, both literally and symbolically. When the Trump family left Washington in January 2021, Barron Trump's world shifted once again. The White House, the place where he had spent his most formative years, was no longer his home. At just 15 years old, he moved to Palm Beach, Florida, settling inside the sun-soaked opulence of Mar-a-Lago. Surrounded by gilded halls, private gardens, and endless luxury, Barron entered a new chapter, one that promised greater privacy, but still carried the weight of his family's name. Life in Palm Beach offered him more freedom than Washington ever could. He could walk through palm-lined courtyards, play on vast lawns, and slip quietly into the ocean breeze without the constant flash of cameras. Yet even in this sanctuary, Barron could never be just another teenager. The Trump estate was not merely a home, it was a fortress buzzing with staff guests and political allies who kept his father's world alive. Barron's adolescence unfolded within this peculiar stage, private yet always touched by the shadows of power and ambition. For Barron, life after the White House has been both a relief and a burden. No longer confined by the constant rhythms of presidential duty, he has been able to grow more freely, shielded by his mother's watchful care. And yet speculation continues to swirl around him. What school will he choose? Will he step into the spotlight one day or remain the family's most elusive figure? Observers point to his commanding height, his reserved nature, and his rare but striking appearances as signs that he could play an important role in the Trump legacy. For now, however, Barron remains silent. Behind the gates of Mar-a-Lago, his life continues quietly, a young man growing in the shadow of history, with the world waiting to see what role he will choose to play. To be born a Trump is to inherit both privilege and burden. For Barron Trump, the youngest of Donald Trump's children, the weight of that surname has been a constant companion from the moment he first opened his eyes. It is a name that opens gilded doors, one associated with skyscrapers, luxury, and a global brand recognized in every corner of the world. Yet it is also a name that carries controversy, political battles, and public scrutiny. For Barron, growing up under the shadow of Trump means walking a tightrope between opportunity and expectation, between privilege and pressure. Unlike his older siblings, Ivanka Donald Jr., Eric and Tiffany Barron's story has always stood apart. Ivanka stepped into the role of polished businesswoman and political advisor. Donald Jr. and Eric became the heirs to the business empire running the Trump organization in their father's absence. Tiffany carved her identity in law and social circles, balancing glamour with independence. But Barron, the youngest, remains different. He has not yet been defined by boardrooms, campaigns, or the constant whirl of cameras. His silence, his distance from the spotlight, has become the most defining part of his identity. And yet it is precisely this silence that gives Barron his quiet power. The world watches and wonders, will he follow the path of politics, stepping into the arena where his father rose and fought? Will he embrace business, carrying forward the Trump empire? Or will he choose to break free, carving his own unique way, untethered from the legacy that surrounds him? Every rare photograph, every glimpse of him beside his family becomes fuel for speculation. The mystery only grows stronger. For Barron, the famous name he carries is both a crown and a chain. It grants him privilege few could imagine, yet it binds him to expectations he never asked for. And as long as he remains silent, the questions will only multiply. The world does not yet know who Barron Trump will become, but perhaps that uncertainty is where his true power lies. In the absence of answers, mystery becomes influence. And Barron, the quietest of the Trumps, may well hold the loudest future. Today, Barron Trump stands at the edge of adulthood, a tall and silent figure, with a future yet to be written. Unlike his siblings, whose paths are already defined by business and politics, Barron remains a mystery, a young man whose story could unfold in countless ways. Will he continue to guard his privacy, choosing a quiet life away from the storm of attention? Or will he one day step into the public eye, carrying the Trump legacy into a new generation? For now, the answers remain hidden. What we know is that Barron's journey is far from over. His life is a reminder that even in the most powerful of families, the future cannot be scripted, it must be lived. He is no longer just the boy in the White House. He has become a symbol of what it means to grow up under history's brightest spotlight, bearing both its privilege and its heavy weight. The story of Barron Trump is still unfolding, and the world waits watching to see who he will choose to become.